ICE agents today carried out the largest statewide sweep to round up and deport what the White House calls undocumented criminals.
Raids targeting as many as 2,000 migrants.
Spreading real fear through immigrant communities coast to coast.
In its short life, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, has created a climate of fear and uncertainty in immigrant communities across the country.
My dad's car was right here. He had to get off the car because they asked him to. So then they handcuffed him and they took him in the car.
Even though many Americans support providing a pathway to legalization to those who call the U.S. home, ICE has broken up families and removed hard-working immigrants from the country through militaristic and traumatizing tactics, costing the country billions in taxpayer dollars. So how did ICE gain this power, and how does it affect families in the U.S. today? ICE has become a well-known arm of the U.S. immigration enforcement system, but it's only been around since 2003. More than 100 years ago, immigration enforcement was carried out by the U.S. Border Patrol, which later became part of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, or INS. At the time, the Border Patrol only had the resources to patrol the country's borders and seacoast, while immigration enforcement in the country's interior was left up to the local governments. In fact, one of the biggest mass deportations in the country was handled this way. During the Great Depression, Americans blamed Mexicans for stealing jobs and draining welfare programs. So, local authorities across the nation deported more than 1 million people to Mexico, most of them American citizens. By 1952, Border Patrol was also permitted to search for undocumented immigrants anywhere in the United States. This paved the way for yet another historic mass deportation 2 years later. Between 250,000 and 1.3 million Mexicans were deported in Operation Wetback, a campaign with a racist name designed to root out undocumented immigrants from American society. Despite these tactics, the country's laws evolved and became more welcoming towards newcomers, and the US saw a tremendous increase in immigration over the next few decades. By 2001, the United States was on the verge of new comprehensive immigration reform.
If somebody is willing to do jobs others in America aren't willing to do, we ought to welcome that person to the country.
But then, on September 11th, Al-Qaeda terrorists carried out a massive attack on the United States, killing nearly 3,000 people and reigniting anti-immigrant sentiment across the country.
I don't want them in this nation to begin with. I don't want them in an airport in the United States, the people who are here to do us harm. I don't want them getting across the border.
Not only were any bilateral migration talks between the US and Mexico immediately derailed by the events of that day, but the US government cracked down on immigration and enforcement across the country. Within days after the attack, the president appointed the first director of the Office of Homeland Security, which later became its own department and absorbed many federal agencies.
Today I sign an executive order creating a new Homeland Security Office charged with strengthening America's protections against terrorism.
By 2003, the Department of Homeland Security opened its doors. Border Patrol became part of the new U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and ICE was founded as a brand new interior enforcement agency, tasked with enforcing immigration laws more aggressively inside the country, including through deportations. And over the years, the agency has become increasingly controversial for its use of aggressive tactics,
Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired!
workplace raids,
It appears that the foot is on the neck for 25 seconds.
poor treatment of detainees, and splitting families apart through deportations.
People are literally feeling, so much fear that they're afraid to leave their homes. They're afraid to walk the streets. They're afraid to go to work. They're afraid to have their children attend school.
In 2008, ICE carried out one of the nation's largest immigration busts.
Agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement raided Postville's largest employer, a food processing plant on the edge of town. 389 illegal immigrants were arrested, hundreds more fled in fear.
The raid cost $5 million and tanked the town's economy. Almost half of Postville disappeared, as those who hadn't been detained either lost their source of income or fled in fear of more raids. This operation was met with so much public outrage that it remained the last mass immigration enforcement operation at a workplace until the election of Donald Trump.
Build that wall! Build that wall!
Trump promised more hardline enforcement.
We are going to triple the number of ICE deportation officers.
In 2019, ICE agents raided multiple food processing plants in Mississippi, arresting 680 immigrant workers in what was called the largest single-state immigration enforcement action in U.S. history. But ICE's tough enforcement actions have significant consequences for more than just immigrants. The American Immigration Council found that more than 16 million people share a home with at least one family member, often a parent, who is undocumented. And according to the U.S. Government Accountability Office, some U.S. citizens have claimed they were mistakenly detained by ICE on immigration charges. Despite these criticisms, the U.S. government continues to increase the agency's funding. ICE spending has nearly tripled over the last 20 years. That is billions of taxpayer dollars being spent on detaining and deporting undocumented immigrants who, in 2019, contributed nearly $6 billion in taxes to the United States. Taxes which fund Social Security and other government programs they can't even access. In recent years, there have been calls to reform or even abolish ICE.
No justice, no peace. Abolish ICE.
Advocates argue that the government is too focused on enforcement and not on other aspects of immigration policy that would better address the country's immigration issues.
An agency like ICE, which repeatedly and systematically violates human rights, does not deserve a dime.
According to a 2019 poll, ICE was the most unpopular federal agency among Americans. And despite its efforts, the agency is not effective in deterring immigration to the United States, where migrant encounters at the border are near record highs. Instead, the US government is spending billions of dollars on a series of tactics that are mostly separating hardworking families and failing to fix the country's immigration problems. The only solution to this is creating a real path to legalization for the millions of hardworking immigrants who have built their lives here for years.